There's a bunch of old people here.
Really? Not old people here. What am I doing?
How you doing?
Yeah, it's a little warm out. Myra, like old I told Cecile, I said, I saw when you and Ronnie were wandering around the library. And Melody. I called her Cecile. Not really. Oh, Star. It was wonderful. It was yeah, me and Wendy. I didn't even know what it was good. She was nice. I was driving. I said, I don't know where to go. Sounds like she didn't turn around. She was talking about the hair. I haven't seen her hair in a long time.
Okay, if everyone wants to get your snacks for the show, the concession stand is open. Get your snacks, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Winnie Lou. Hey, girls, start. So get your snacks and I just want to say one thing tonight. Oh, there's it. There's it again. When we talked about, y'all hear me? If you can hear my voice, clap once. Hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. Now hush up. Class. Okay. The boys in the corner over there. Okay. When we were talking about doing this, many times, we talked about this. Having this night tonight. Having this speaker tonight. Well, it was said that, oh, they didn't think we could draw a crowd for that. Kennedale doesn't want to hear about the old days. Well, I just want to say, y'all were dead. Whoever said that was dead wrong. Look at this great crowd we got. So with that being said, welcome to everybody. Get your snacks and everything. And I'm going to turn it over to our whiz kid, Debbie.
All right. Let everybody know about the Kennedale news that has been, we've got the first 4 years that has been scanned and is now available online for free via the portal to Texas History. I just picked up the original papers back today. They're all here in this box. They've been scanned and they're online. You can see how they're all falling apart, and there's no way that anybody could have looked through these and found any kind of information very easily by going through these newspapers that are falling apart. And now we've got this wonderful tool. So I want to show everybody kind of how this works. on the Historical Society website, it's on our Facebook. And this is what it looks like when you go there. So this is about the Kennedale News. They just have a little blip about the start of it because that's all that we sent them. They'll eventually add more of the history of the Kennedale News and know all about the whole thing. You can see there's 193 issues that they digitized, 996 pages over 4 years. So you can see here's all of the different issues, and you can, if you move the mouse over it, it'll tell you the volume, the number, and the date that it is. So that was December of '68. Now, let's say if I go into items here.
Louder.
One moment.
Devin, can you speak up just a tiny bit?
Yes. Lost my internet connection. Let me reconnect here.
Always happens. It always does that.
Okay, so here's the 193 items. Over here, you can change how it sorts them. Right now, it's sorting them by the date that they were added, and it's putting the newest ones there. So let's say you want to put them by the date created, oldest first, and then they'll be in chronological order. So you can see now, this is the very first issue of the Kennedale News from March 11th, 1965. So I can click on it, and there's that. It shows you the different pages. You can search inside that issue if you're looking for something in particular, or you can click on a page and see it bigger. You can click the zoom button, and the zoom button, it'll bring this up, and you can zoom it right in. You can see it's a pretty good scan.
Go to the other side, because Rhonda's in there. There's
Yeah.
Rhonda.
Look at my dark hair.
When you're in the zoom feature, so let's say you want to print something, you find something you want to print. So you'll hit print preview, and it'll take you into this page. And it's going to show you exactly how much of it it's going to print, and you can zoom in and change that. I typically make it a little bit smaller so I can see the whole thing. So let's say you want to print off that much of it, and you just hit print, and then you can save it as a PDF or tell it which printer you want it to print to, and that will print off that section of the newspaper. Or the other thing you can do, let me go zoom this back again. When you're on this page, you can go to Tools or Download, and you can go down to Download Large, and then it'll just download a JPEG copy. So there's a copy that's just like a picture that you would make on your phone, and you can go into Photoshop and crop whatever part of it you want, and that'll be what you've got.
65 the first year we got published.
65 is the first year.
Who was the publisher?
Let's see. It says J.K. Grant.
Kelly Grant.
So it's also searchable. So
Put Darlene's name in it. I think that's the one I searched for Darlene in.
Winters or what?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember what I put.
So I searched for Darlene, and here's the results that came up. So I clicked this issue, and then over here it says matching results to. So I'll click that, and it'll show the different ones. So then it actually highlights where she appears. She's on the honor roll.
And Melvin was on the honor roll too, and Wayne was on the.
So then you can go down to the next issue and see the results there. Click the matching results. Click the first one. Heading for the hills. You remember that play?
But there's my dad's, McDonald, that was his business.
School board election. They also have a lot of these old historic pictures that were published, and a lot of them have the names and everything as well. And they do that really well.
It's the old one. That's my grandma in the sailor dress right here in the front.
You can't see that
I
far.
just told you I couldn't see nothing up there.
So
Yeah.
there's different ways you can search. So I put Darlene McDonald, and so it's going to find every time Darlene shows up and every time McDonald shows up. But if I put it in quotes, it'll only do Darlene McDonald together. So I can search it like that, and then
She made the egg on
We were in
lot.
school.
They didn't have anything else to write about.
the cheerleaders.
So how far did the issues go?
So right now, what they've done, this is a trial. They did the first 4 years for free for us. And the reason is they want to see how much the community actually cares about getting these scanned and getting them put online. They are keeping track of how many people go and look at these newspapers. They're keeping track of how many people per day look at them, how many people look at this issue and that issue and this page and that page. They're keeping track of all of it. And what we'll do is we'll use those numbers when we apply for a big grant to fund the whole project to get all of the newspapers scanned. So if you like it and you want the rest of them done, go and look up something every day. Send it to all your friends, share it on Facebook, email it out, however you can do it. But the higher the numbers are, the better chance we have of getting a grant to get them all the way funded through current. Because the goal is to get all of the Kennedale newspapers put online. We did a lot of work to get them all in order and inventoried, and we counted all the pages, and we did a lot of work on that. And then we also have a photo morgue from the Kennedale News, a lot of the original pictures that were published in the paper. We're about to apply for a $1,000 grant from UNT to do the first section of those pictures. There's, I think, 8 or 9 sections, something like that. That's 256 pictures per grouping, so there's somewhere around 2,000 pictures, something like that. Anyways, so the first grouping, we're trying to get those approved for funding to go online with the first 4 years of the newspaper, and that'll sort of help them determine how to fund the project. But we also have issues with the North Current Star, and we got the rights for that to go online. UNT also has some issues with that. Yes, sir. You have a
What
question?
year did Kennedale newspaper start?
1965. And we've got all through the 70s and 80s and 90s and the 2000s. We've got them all at the library. We've got the North Current Star, which covered Kennedale, Everman, and Forest Hill as well. So that'll be included with the project. So even if there's people kind of neighboring in Forest Hill or Everman, let them know about this, because this will ultimately help get the North Current Star done, which affects them. And Everman doesn't have a library anymore, so we can't get any help from them. And Forest Hill doesn't have any newspapers at all, so this is their only shot at getting newspapers. So hopefully they will help us do that. But there's tons and tons of stuff on here to look through just with those 4 years. The scans turned out really good because they're scanning the original papers instead of microfilm, and everything looks so good. So be sure to go and check that out. If you have any questions about it, reach out to the Historical Society and we'll get back to you. Back to my deal here. So that was the information about the Kennedale News. The physical papers, there's a lot of duplicates. What we decided to do, because the library doesn't have room to store them, we're going to donate them to UNT because they have special archival storage and we'll keep them forever. But we're going to take the duplicates out and keep some of them for the Historical Society to display. And the rest of the duplicates we're going to donate to the Tarrant County Archives to keep there, and they'll keep them forever. So the physical papers aren't going anywhere. They're not being destroyed or anything. That's where they're going to be. You can always go and see them either place. But of course, it's pretty much easier to just search online and see them like this. They will also provide us with a drive that will have all of the high resolution scans that they make eventually once the project's finished. So I wanted to also announce we got all of the R.F. Patterson Elementary yearbooks scanned. They just finished that in the past week or so. They have some processing that needs to be done to them before they're ready to go online, but we're continuing with our yearbook project. We've just applied for a $1,000 grant to get more yearbooks scanned and put online. We're trying to get not just all the high school ones, but all of the Kennedale ISD school yearbooks that we can find scanned and made available online. With that, we'll get started. I want to welcome Wayne Winters and Myra Rickard. Come on.
Just to start off with, our family was not the oldest of the families here. There were a lot of people and a lot of families that were here before our Winters family started coming here. And, you know, there's probably 6 or 7 generations of those old families that are still here. So this is supposed to be just kind of about how we ended up here and growing up. And really, what was significant, I think, about our growing up here was Kennedale was such a small town, and I did this map of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and there's not much on it because there wasn't very much during that period of time, but from the creek down to just south, you know, Mansfield Cardinal to Eden Road, but the primary area of Kennedale was right there around the cemetery, the high school, the churches, things like that. So I've kind of got a presentation here, and I'm going to read it, and we're going to go through some pictures. This was, everybody knew his Uncle Bud, and his name was Walter Winter, and he was the first one to live close to Kennedale, and he lived out on Mansfield Highway, just south of where Eden Road came in. He had a big garden there. And Mom said that as people drove from Mansfield to Fort Worth, they would stop and buy vegetables from him. Then as he retired, later on he moved into town, but he became janitor of First Baptist Church. So Uncle Bud lived on Mansfield Highway between Bisbee and Kennedale. And Kennedale, back in that period of time, we were more of a community. And we were a community with New Hope and Bisbee. So this area, we were separated from Fort Worth. And our primary people who shopped at our grocery stores and stuff like that, they came from New Hope and Bisbee and Kennedale itself. My great-grandfather built a home in Halton City near Sylvania, built out, and Uncle Bud's brother, John, built a florist shop on Sylvania Avenue with John A. Winters Florist. That building is still there, it's changed hands though. Dad's family traveled between the Texas Panhandle, where he was born, and Corsicana, Kearns, Texas, on 287, down there in Corsicana. One of their sisters married a guy from down there, and they traveled back and forth mainly picking cotton. My grandfather was a traveler. He thought the grass was always greener somewhere else besides where he was. So they did a lot of traveling up and down 287, going through Kennedale, and somehow or another Uncle Bud ended up here. But Daddy and him drove, you know, with their parents back and forth in that period. The late 30s. Dad was Paul Winters, and he moved to the Fort Worth area around 1942. And then he married my mother, Sue Davis, in 1944. And they moved to Gertie Barrett Road, which is down further south before you get to Bisbee. And they lived in a little house down there for a while. Then they moved to Mansfield Cardinal Road, right where Mansfield Cardinal comes into 287. It's where some of you know where the Beyondi's washateria is. That was the area, and they had tar paper shacks. People ask, what's a tar paper shack? Well, they were a building that was one-sided. It didn't have 2 or 4 walls. It just had a piece of wood. On the inside, they might have wallpaper, and on the outside they would have tar paper. And those things usually had like 2 rooms. Mom and Dad rented a place there, and Mom always told the story they had to share a bathroom with the people next door. So she was not real happy about that. They were the first or second. Okay, there were some, this was on the first post office in the city of Kennedale, and it was located, the heart of Kennedale used to be right around the railroad tracks where Broadway, but at that time it was called, really it was called the Old Mansfield Road. And it went from up in this area here, and followed down the railroad tracks, then it came over, and went down, and later on, in the 40s, they built, straightened it out and built a highway. They actually didn't really make it a highway until about 1954. Had some old pictures of when they were building the highway in 54. That was before it got the center lane and all that stuff. Then go to the next picture. That was the second post office, and that post office was located right in that area, across the street from where Helen grew up. And okay, there's a picture of the tar paper shacks, and that's Lee Henry and his wife as well. Louise. And that's where Mom and Dad met them. They also lived in one of those tar paper shacks.
Wayne, can you scoot over some because you're not in the camera? Little bit more.
I was about to stay.
Okay, right there. That's good. Anywhere from there on. Good.
And the Henrys are Melvin's cousins.
Yes, the Henrys, Melvin's mother was a Henry, and that was her brother, and Louise was a Ratliff. And the Ratliffs lived on Big Price Road, which was about right in that area right there. Dad started the first taxi service in Kennedale. This was the owner of those tar paper shacks, and Daddy was helping him haul some stuff, and so he made a sign. He said, "Kennedale Taxi Service." That was the first non-taxi service. Daddy had been working for the Bowen Bus Company that later became Continental Bus Lines and later became Greyhound Lines. But he was working for them when my brother was born in 1945. And Dad bought an old bus that they had quit using, and he moved it to Kennedale and set it up on the lot that he bought where we grew up. And they moved into that. Daddy and Mama and my brother moved into that old bus that he made into a couple of living quarters. Still had an outdoor potty. Then in 1948, I was born, and Dad worked for a company out of Fort Worth. The guy's name was Ben Wayne Turpin. So everybody always asked me if I was named after John Wayne. I was not. Daddy's grandfather was a John, but I was named after Mr. Ben, who was Ben Wayne Turpin that Daddy worked for. And he played an important part in Daddy's life, my mom and Dad's life, and actually in Ollie and Dorothy's life too. Mr. Ben and his wife, they had no children, so they kind of adopted us as their surrogate family. And so all four of us were living in that bus, and Mr. Ben said, "Paulie," he called me Paul. He said, "You got to get those kids out of that bus." And Daddy said, "I don't have money to build a house." So he said, "Well, you just go build it to what it costs, and I'll need the money for it."
We're having a station break.
So at that time, Daddy started scavenging building materials, buying stuff and moving them out there, and then we started building that house. anyway, he built the house at the corner of Fifth Street and New Hope Road, which was, there was one block from the Mansfield Highway, US 287. So you can tell, with this being the heart of the city, we were right in the heart of the city. Everybody that, you know, walked to school or kid, they came by our house, some of them came to spend the night with us. It was close enough to walk into their house.
I think you need to raise your hand if you ever spent the night in that house. Have you ever walked by that house? You walked by that house, Melody, Land of and the Street.
The house that Daddy built was 2 bedrooms and had 1 bath and a kitchen and a living area. And a kitchen, dining, and then a living area. Even though we had the bathroom and all the fixtures, we didn't have water. So, the city of Kennedale actually incorporated into a general law city in 1947. The purpose at that time was to be able to put in a water system, because everybody had independent wells and things like that. So the city in 47 incorporated, and then they had some elections shortly after that, and they sold some bonds and built the water tower, and it started the water system. But it started right there, and, you know, with limited funds, they build a little and build a little, until, you know, they finally got the system established. The water system actually went in 1951, so Daddy was in the process of building our house in 50. So we didn't have running water. Daddy had a well, and this was the back of our old house. And that's me and my brother and my dad when he was building that house. You can see a lot of the materials was old used materials that he scavenged from different places. In the 1950s, that's in the 50s, that was the City Hall. In the 50s and 60s, were the earlier area, located down where shopping center is now, across the street from the high school and elementary school. That was City Hall, that's City Secretary, that's Police Department, that was everything. Dad's brother, Ollie, got out of the Army in 1949. Oh, that's the hard time. There you go. That was Ollie, Daddy's brother, her grandfather. When he got out, he moved to Kennedale. He came to Kennedale in 1950. And he and Daddy operated, Ollie lived with us, and him and Dad went in and right in that area right there, where Bowman Springs intersects with Mansfield Highway. There was an old metal building there. It was a Sinclair gas station. So Daddy and Ollie rented that building and started selling gas out there. And they had, this was an advertisement for one of the angles, Winters Brothers Sinclair Service Station. And that's where it was located, down on the highway, north part of town. Ollie and Dorothy Ward was born and raised here. She was a Sweeney and a Ward, and then she married Ollie in 1951. So they didn't have a place to live, so they moved in with Mom and Dad and me and my brother in 1951. And then, well, actually Myra was already here. Myra was born in 1950 and Pam was born in 53, but in 51, Ollie and Dorothy lived with us until they were able to build a house next door. Then I didn't know this until just a few years ago, a couple of years ago, I was talking to Ollie about it, and he said that that Mr. Ben had actually loaned him and Dorothy the money to build their house. So he was an individual, you know, loaning money for people trying to get started. In about 52 or 53, Dad's oldest sister, Edith, who had married a guy down in Kearns, Texas. Her and her husband separated. She had 3 kids, so she moved to Kennedale. She moved in with us. She was actually living with us with her 3 kids when Pam was born. So Mom said it turned out that, you know, she had a babysitter while she was in the hospital with Pam. In fact, Edith's oldest son was Kenneth Trammell. And Kenneth graduated in 1958, and it was the first graduating class, 12th grade graduating class for the city of Kennedale. So that's another of our family members that was, you know, here during some growth times. While Edith was living with us, Daddy had another brother that came to town. His name was John. And John Winters was a bachelor, but he was in the Baptist church, and he was a song leader and a youth minister and stuff like that. So he moved to Kennedale and lived with Mom and Dad. So at that time, there were 4 of us kids, Mom and Dad, Edith and her 3 kids, and John. Well, John and Edith decided to get a little crowded. So they went and rented a house down there by the tar paper shack, down in this area here, right where Broadway comes into the highway. They lived there, and then her and her husband got back together, and he moved. Well, at that point in time, John had moved out again. I'm kind of bouncing around here. So, Alvin Bueller had closed their soda fountain and some things that he was doing, and Alvin started an ambulance service at a funeral home. And the funeral home, the building still exists down on Mansfield Highway, but it's a different use now. But John went to work for Alvin, and at the funeral home, they had a living quarters in the back. So John lived in the living quarters, and then they had funeral services. But they didn't actually have the services there, but they had viewings there and things like that. So John was able to get out of the house. Then Ollie and Dorothy had built their house, and they had to move next door. The Kennedale School District was established in the 1880s. In the 40s, the school district only went to the 10th grade and later to the 11th grade. The primary buildings were the old lead brick building, which most of us, or a lot of us still remember. We probably, Mel and I, they used to go up there and show movies. You remember going up there and seeing movies for a couple of years, but we actually started the school in what was the elementary building, which now I guess is the admin building. So we started out in the other school, but that was one of the original school buildings. At that time, they only went to the 10th grade, and later to the 11th grade, and finally into the 12th grade. There was another building just to the left. This is the building that we went to school in. It was under construction in about 1952, 51, something like that. And then there was a building that was to the end of it where the old flagpole used to sit. That building and the red brick building were there, when we started school. The gymnasium got built in 1953. This is where all the Winters family and the Trammels went to school. And again, Kenneth was the first one of the graduating class that went to 12th grade. In 1954, Daddy and Ollie decided that they would build a new gas station, and they built it right in that triangle, right there where New Hope Road and Mansfield Highway and actually Short Street. And they built, it was an Humble gas station, and they, Mr. Ben loaned them money to build that gas station. But they did, it was full service, they did gas, oil change, water, windshield wiper fluid, air in the tires, they did oil changes. Go back for 1 second. At that time, this was a grease rack where you pulled your car up in there and they raised it up and they did a grease job on the car. And then that was where they washed the car. So it was full service.
And it's still
And the building is still there now, but they and Ollie sold that, I think, they built it in 54 and I think they sold it in 56. And they sold it to James Henry Rogers and Joe Buell. So that's where their uncle ended up with it. And it became, they changed it to a Phillips 66. This was an Humble station. And it got changed to a Phillips 66.
Used to be J.W. Rent.
it's still there.
Well, before J.W.
Where the old arrow
was
is.
Henry Rogers, James Rogers, and Joe Buell. Joe Buell married, Joe Buell's son married, one of the Schaefer girls.
Dorothy.
Dorothy. By 1954, the city had a little bit of a water system up here. We still didn't have water in our house, but there was a little bit of a water system. And when Daddy and Ollie opened that gas station, they had water. They had restrooms there. And on the Mansfield Highway, you have to keep in mind, that was the main route between basically Houston and Canada. And so there was all kinds of truck traffic, all kinds of vehicular traffic, people traveling and stuff like that. So when they stopped at the gas station, everybody piled out to the bathroom. So another service that they provided, they would let customers come in there and fill up cans with water. And they'd take, but most of the time it's milk cans. Come in there, fill up the milk can, put the lid on it, take it home, and that was your water for a week or whatever. That was another thing that they allowed the people to do.
Wayne, my grandpa, Tommy, used to tell me that when your mom and daddy opened the gas station, one of the big draws was to be customers on that day. Every woman that came there to get her car serviced or got gas would get a fresh, long-cut rose. Well, of course, Grandma was already at working, and Grandpa was tooling around town by himself, and he went home and he put on one of Grandma's dresses and a hat and drove back through, and your daddy gave him a rose, and then later he went back up there as himself and said, "Look what I got." And your daddy said, "How'd you get that?"
All right, that's what I had. In 1955, the city of Kennedale built the first city hall, or second city hall. And they built that city hall right at the corner of 5th and New Hope Road, 1 block off the highway. That was basically, this end was the police department, and you had the city secretary's office, and then the back part of that was the council chamber. So that was everything. That was city secretaries, all the water department, everybody operated out of that building, and it was built in 1955. Along about that time, Daddy decided to get into the real estate business. He got his real estate license in 1955, and he was dabbling in real estate at that time, and Miss Sue Williamson, who lived, this was the Williamson estate, and it was located down on Broadway. And so Miss Williamson, we lived right here, Miss Williamson would walk up by the house and go to McKay's grocery store to get her stuff. And she asked Daddy to go with her, walk up there and help her carry the groceries back. And so Daddy and Miss Williamson really became good friends. And one day, she lived in that house incidentally with her brother, who was, I think, Bud Williams. I think his name was Bud Williams. Anyway, they were both, she was old lady and he was a bachelor. They lived in that old place together. And one day, as she was walking by there, got Daddy to go up there, and she was pointing out some property right there between Short Street and Fifth, right across county corner across from us, this was our house. So this property was here, and they were walking up at that time these roads were still dirt roads. So Daddy walked with Mrs. Williams up to the McKay's grocery store, and she said, Paul, you need to buy that property. And Daddy said, Miss Williams, I don't have any money to buy this property. And she said, I'll carry the note for you. She owned it. He said, well, I can't pay you for it. She said, you rent those two houses right there, and you can pay me for it. And so he bought it, and at that time, who first lived there was the Tollivers. I don't know if many of you remember them. And then the Greens, Bobby Green, Shirley Green, they lived there. And then later on, the Colliers lived there. And
So Wayne, is that New Hope Road that runs right there?
I'm sorry?
Is that New Hope Road that runs right there?
New Hope Road went between that house and our house.
Okay.
We went to the highway right there. Highway's right up here.
And that road is
So
right there.
where these buildings are located right here, that's the back of the auto parts store. That's where the auto parts store is. There's also, on the back side of that, is this building right here. You can see there's our house in the background. There's one of the rent houses. And this building was located on that property. So Daddy rented that that's the third post office in the city of Kennedale. Daddy rented that to the post office. They moved from Broadway up to this area and operated out of there. And that's where, I think that's where your daddy started, was in that building right there.
Yeah, I think Grandma, Aunt Jessie was in there. Aunt Jessie was in there.
Jesse and
And
Ruth,
And
Jesse
when
and
they
Ruth
got
were both
in
there.
next to the car parts place there, when that building was built, that's where Daddy started in there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I think that was the one before.
So now your aunts were here, Ruth was in there, and Jesse. And the post office boxes, there wasn't, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 boxes at that time. You walk in that door, and on the left were the boxes, and straight ahead there was you go buy stamps and talk to the post mistress and stuff like that. And then this little room right here was, Daddy made a deal with them that they could use it for storage, and he used it for storage, because Daddy changed all this into his lumberyard there, and we used this part of the building. He stored hardware and stuff in there. And I remember a time or two, I'd go in there, and there was a lock on the door. We had a key to it, and Jesse had a key to it. And it was a master. It had a master key, but they would sack up the mail for weekend delivery or night delivery, and they put it in that little room in there. And I remember many times going in there and get something out of there, and there'd be a sack of mail sitting there. Wasn't real secure. But, Daddy and Ollie sold their gas station. Ollie went to work for a Goodyear tire company, and later he worked for Prudential Insurance before he ended up getting a real estate license in Colorado. And he and Dorothy had moved to Colorado. But Dad started his real estate company in the building that was located right in this area here. There's Miss McKay's grocery store, and I'm not sure, Daddy might have moved that building in there, I don't know. But it's clearly not there in that picture, because there's Miss McKay's, and Daddy was right on the corner. But he started in that building, and he started tearing down old buildings and old houses. He was one of the original repurposers. Long before Sanford, son. But we bring in lumber, and our job was to go out there and pull the bales out of lumber. We'd restack it, and they would resell it, and his lumber field became known as the Pepperwood Lumber Company. Because all the lumber had holes in it. We cleaned bricks there. We tear down buildings, pull the bricks in there and dump the loads. They hand cleaned the bricks. And that was a real short opportunity of the brick to clean bricks. Well, it took all day to clean 100 bricks so you make $1. And then we had, on the backside, there it is. On the backside, then you start seeing lumber stacked up around here. We stored doors and stuff there. There's the back of that post office, the third post office. And then this building was, Daddy bought a building somewhere, and he cut it in half. And he moved half of that building to there. And I'm not sure, but I think he moved the other half down to Broadway Street, down there by the fire department. We had that lot down there, we had a couple of run houses there. So anyway, that was the beginning of when Daddy was getting into the lumber business at that time.
So who's those cute little girls?
Who's that?
Oh, William's your dad, that's Pamela and my sister.
I thought it looked like him, but I don't think it looks like him.
Knows about that.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It looks like him. I don't know who that is. I mean, you know, we had all the neighborhood kids, and Daddy would open the door and count 4 and close the door. They said, walk in, got to eat. You're slow,
By 1954, the city of Kennedale had pretty much from the water tower, had a system started to develop. You could see, where the highway was, as it was basically, it's about like the old road is now. I mean, there wasn't much of a highway, but it was paved.
It didn't have a big potholes.
And so, Ollie and Dorothy built their house on 5th Street right next to us. And a little later than that, they were about, I think Larry was born after 1952. Larry was born, then later Fred and Kelly, Melanie's dad, were born in that house. And when Dad had the office building here, the one that I think that he moved in, there was a spare room at the end of that. And Dad's other brother, Eugene, moved to Kennedale. He moved in with us, and he started an ice cream store. And he sold malts and ice cream cones and stuff like that, and the name of it was Y'all Come Ice Cream. And he was competing with, at that time, the Moores, Doris Moore, Jim Moore, and Doris's dad had a little ice cream shop down here, just south of Broadway on Nashville Highway. So Gene only lasted about 3 or 4 months, and he packed it up. So that became another storage building for hardware. Dad was moving a few houses into Kennedale in the mid-1950s. He remodeled and either sold them or rented them. He also moved a few out of Kennedale. He purchased 2 houses on Broadway and rented them for a while, and that was right there by the post by the fire department. He rented those 2 houses for a while, and then he moved those 2 houses from there to off of Big Price Road on Garcia Lane. And then he sold those houses out there on Garcia Lane. And the guy that he sold to didn't have a whole lot of money, but he had a horse. so Daddy took a quarter horse in from the guy as a part of the down payment. And that became mine and Bob's Christmas present.
You can't make this stuff up.
Where Dad moved those 2 houses from, down there on Broadway, is where now the Stovall brothers are located. Daddy had moved that old building in down there, and the metal tin building, and he leased it to Bill and James. And they started their cabinet shop in there. Then later on, that cabinet shop, their other brother Jerry came in and put his electric company in with them. And then later on, their other brother Jack came in and had Stovall Construction. So they took that whole area there, and now when you go by, it's a pretty good sized deal, and it goes on down. They even bought some land in here and made it L-shaped, where they had storage and things like that. Later on, Daddy sold them that, and before they started all that remodeling and adding on. Then this was the Julian's drugstore and ice cream and soda shop. It was up on the highway across the street, right in that area right there. It was across the street from Daddy and his gas station. And you could go in there and get malts and ice cream, and it was basically a drugstore. I think they sold aspirin and stuff like that. I don't think it was a pharmaceutical type company. Then in 1950, okay, this is the back side of the station that they built. This was Ted Willis's grocery store. At that time, you can see that's 1955. The streets in here were still dirt roads, so we didn't have paved roads at that time. In 1952 and 1953, so in 1952-53, the First Baptist Church built a new church building, and it's an L-shaped 2-story church building that where they tore down the old building. And so this was Alvin Hewlin, this was Mr. Turpin, this is Mr. Spencer, that was my dad, that was the preacher, was Tommy Hewlin, that was Leo Eller, I'm not sure who that was. That was Leland Gray, I don't know who that is. That's Daddy's brother, John Winter, and then Lloyd Knox. Those were pretty much kind of the deacons of the church at that time. And this was a good dedication ceremony where they placed a cornerstone in 1953. In 1954, the church burnt down. This is another picture of the cornerstone. There's other folks there. That's over that side right there. That was Uncle Bud. He was a janitor of the church at that time. In 1954, the church, that was the finished church after they got it built, and there was an old tabernacle out there. You remember the tabernacle? We used to have vacation Bible school in that old tabernacle out there. It got torn down, and, right after the church got built, they cleaned that lot up. But when the church burnt down in 1954, the church was only 2 years old when it burnt down, burnt around just a few hours. We only had a volunteer fire department, and, didn't have a lot of water, a lot of stuff to, put fires out, so it burned the ground. So this was the, groundbreaking ceremony for, the new replacement church. And that was, Lloyd Knotts and Dad, and this was Don Lyons. Don was real important. Don built a lot of houses in Kennedale, and built for a lot of people. He actually built the gas station for Ollie and Dad. So, and then later on, Don and Dad built a few houses together. Don was notorious for putting flat roofs on houses. They were cheaper to build, they were easier to build, you could get in and get out. The problem was that they beat real bad. So most of the ones that he built around town, you drive by now, they've got a pitch roof on them. People went in and put a sloped roof right in water. I kind of already gone over this, but in the mid to late 50s is when Alvin Bueller and his wife left their home and the grocery store, that's New Bueller, and they left their soda shop and they moved down the highway to along in that area there, and that's where they bought a house, and then they had that building there where the funeral home was. He provided ambulance services. They had emergency transportation for the hospitals. They also used just to carry coffins into funerals and things like that. Next door to the funeral home was Jack Cunningham's flower shop. So you could call Jack and order flowers. He'd walk next door and deliver them to the funeral home. But what was odd about Jack Cunningham's flower shop, he also sold minnows and worms and fish bait. So if somebody was going to go to his creek, out there and go fishing, they could stop at that. They could get flowers or worms either one and go fishing. One of the features and most enjoyable times as a young boy growing up was when Bill Davis would come to town. We all knew Bill Davis. He brought his mules and wagons, and he would go to Mr. K's grocery store right on the corner there, and the word hit the street, that, hey, Bill's in town. I mean, all the kids would swarm, and then he'd declare his wagon when he got his groceries and got ready to leave. And so he'd give all the kids a ride, and they lived right out here on family land that they inherited from being slaves on the Rogers plantation. So they lived there up until the 70s. But anyway, Bill would come to town and get groceries for him and his sister Faye, and all the kids would jump on that wagon, and he'd take off, and he'd take us all the way down around the cemetery. When we got to the bottom of the hill on Summit Road, he'd stop, and he'd just say, all right, you kids, get on out of here. Go on back home. And we'd all get off and go back home. But this is where he went to buy his groceries.
But another thing about that is, we eventually moved next door to them on Little Road. So, that family happened to live where, we eventually moved to. Did you say that? He didn't say that. I don't think he was.
Also along the highway there was Bill's Barber Shop. He was located, I don't remember which one of those he was in.
On the left.
And I don't know what was in the other side. Did not know, remember what was in the other side of that? Anyway, that was Phil's Barber Shop. Next door to that building right there was Granny Fink and and Best Inc. opened a little store in there, and they sold various and sundry goods and different things. And I, as a kid, I remember, I don't know, I was
The hardware store.
8, 10 years old or something, and they let me buy a brownie camera. It was layaway. It was probably about $3 or $4, but they had to set it aside, and every once in a while I'd go in and give them a quarter or something. So I got to pay for it. They did a lot of layaway sales in there, and I remember I bought a rod and reel in there, and I bought that camera, and then shortly after that, they went out of business. Also, across the street from that was, on that side of the street, was Ted Willis's grocery store. And in that grocery store, there was a variety store on the far right-hand side of that, and that was Miss Pig's variety store. And that's Willie Pig, who was the superintendent of Mansfield Schools. He and his wife owned that. So you didn't know that, did you? And then in the other end of that building was a drugstore, and it was Vic Terry was the druggist at that time. Then a year or so after that, across the street from the Baptist church, right in there was the Gulf station was built. And back during when the time we were growing up, it always struck me that Kennedale had more churches and more gas stations than anywhere I could ever think of. Because I counted, in between the Red Ball gas station down towards Disney and the creek up there, one time I counted like 11 gas stations. And could pretty much name them all too. And then in churches. And there was about 11 or 12 churches along the highway, and just, some of them were just, you know, the McLaughlins. You remember the McLaughlins? Lived over by you. Mr. McLaughlin had that church over there. So we had churches all over Kennedale. Okay, so now we're kind of getting into the 60s. By 1959, Daddy had become friends with Dr. Percy Cook of Mansfield. Dr. Cook was an investor with Dad in some early ventures. Then in 1959, Dad and Dr. Cook formed a partnership and bought the land that Daddy had bought from Mrs. Williamson. And they built the grocery store there, the A.L. Davis grocery store. That would have been the land right there where that Daddy had bought from Mrs. Williamson. When they got ready to start, before he sold this to Dr. Cook, he started getting the buildings and things off there. And the old post office was still there. But Daddy moved that house right there over to Sublette Road, right off of Little School Road and Sublette Road, like right in there. Daddy moved that house over there, remodeled it, and sold it. He was shifting properties to different locations. So Daddy negotiated a lease for A.L. Davis. A.L. Davis was a local food chain, but they were primarily located in Tennant County. So they had like 8 or 10 stores. So Daddy and Dr. Cook, in their partnership, they built this building for A.L. Davis, and then they built this in was the post office. That was the 4th post office in the city of Kennedale. And when they leased that out to A.L. Davis, like A.L. Davis later sold it to Buddy's. Buddy's sold to Winn-Dixie, and then Winn-Dixie moved down, you know, to the highway here. So, and Daddy, during that time, he renegotiated with the post office, for that deal there, so they moved from the building up here to here. And then after they got moved in, they tore that building down, so there's nothing out there now except parking lot between the highway and that building. By this time, Mr. McKay's grocery store was gone, and then Ted Willis's grocery store was still existing, but once A.L. Davis came in, they just couldn't compete, so Ted Willis's grocery store also closed. Then, Mr. and Mrs. Watson lived across the street.
We don't know who the mystery girl is.
Mr. and Mrs. Watson lived in this house across the street from us. We lived here. You can still see these dirt roads out here. They had an old hand pump. Melody, you remember that hand pump? Kids would walk up and down New Hope Road, going to school or playing or whatever we were doing. And if it got hot and thirsty, they'd go over there to that pump and pump that thing up and get cold, fresh water out of that old pump. Up until the time that the Watsons sold that property to the Church of Christ. That's the property, that's where that house was sitting, right there. And, I think, yeah. This was where the Church of Christ was operating on the south side of the Watson's house, the Watson's property, right there on New Hope Road. So, and this was, Linda, that was Bud Fields?
Yeah, well,
And then that was y'all,
yeah,
or was that the thing?
we had both those houses and then.
That's y'all. So the lot was vacant there on the corner. After the Church of Christ built, the city of Kennedale bought this building and they moved it across the street to that lot over there. And that became the first community center for the city of Kennedale. The Watsons, that was in 1961 when the Watsons sold, and they moved down Fifth Street, about 3 or 4 blocks down, across the street from the hill. Not long after that, Dr. Harris came to town and he built a new clinic on New Hope Road. So you can kind of tell everything that's revolving around is right here in the heart of town. The schools, the churches, all the retail. All of the activity up and down the Mansfield Highway. All the kids coming to school, or a lot of the kids coming to school, would either come up Broadway like Melvin and them, or some others would come up and cross the highway at this point right here. And at that time, there was no red lights on the highway. It was just highway. And so, at that time, Carl Halverson started what's called the Patrol Boys. And so, I think, I'm not sure, were we 7th graders or 8th graders? Patrol Boys. Seventh. So, but anyway, there's Daryl, there's Melvin, Vernon Calder, Johnny Hendricks, Adrian Richardson, and me. So we were patrol boys, and we went there twice a day, 2 of us, one on each side of the highway, and you'd stop the traffic to let the kids go across the street. Because there were no crosswalks, there were no red lights or anything. So that was our safety to get the kids to and from school. In 1961, we moved from our home on New Hope Road, and we moved out to Little School Road right into that area right there. We were right next to the Twin Oaks Farms, and Dad moved the house in there. When we moved out there were two little worker houses. Next to us was an area called Twin Oaks Farms, and they had owned groundskeepers and people who lived on site in two little houses. They were little three-room houses. So when we moved out there, we actually moved into both those houses. We ate and watched TV in one, and we'd go and sleep in the other. They were about 50 yards apart or something like that.
Sometimes Dad forgot his teeth in the other house and had to go over and get them. He would have to go get his teeth.
So Dad bought a house. He bought a house to be moved over in Arlington off Matlock Road. It was between 303 and Arkansas Lane. And we went over there and tore all the bricks off of it. It was on the slab. We jacked it up, put a floor in it, moved it out there, remodeled it, and then we moved into that house. So that's where we lived until I graduated living in that house in Byron Pale.
That's the one you got now?
That's the one I moved. We moved it from there to Rickard, now. My mother always said, this is just a house looking for a home.
Boy, you should have knocked on the wood.
It was around the 1930s. Like I said, the old highway, or the old Mansfield Road, went up, and it came down, and it went up back, and it just kind of went to the heart of Kennedale, which was there. So in the 30s, they straightened the road out, and things started migrating then up to the then highway. In 1965, the Kennedale Nursing Home was built. This is Mansfield Cardinal Road, this is Summit Road, and this is Mansfield Highway. And for the ones that don't know, that's where Burger Box is. And incidentally, this picture came from Carol's dad. Carol is Dr. Cook's daughter, my dad's partner. So he gets half the blame for some of this stuff. This particular picture is a picture that her dad, he bought a helicopter so that they could go look at real estate.
I'm saying it's your daddy that's talking. My daddy was talking to me. I would pull those nails out.
So anyway, this is a picture that her dad took. But Daddy and Dr. Cook actually bought that lot right there. And let's see. As the city of Kennedale was migrating towards the highway, some of this building, the old tar paper shack sat right in there. And so they had kind of started disappearing, and some more commercial buildings were going in. Daddy and Dr. Cook developed 100 acres down at New Hope, at the corner of New Hope Road and Vic Price Road. From Mr. Jake Williams, they bought 100 acres in there, and they developed lots that were 1 and 2 acre tracts. And after they developed it, they sold some lots. Daddy built a lot of houses down there. I built a couple down there. But anyway, that was the development that Dr. Cook and Daddy did. Then they did another one down in the Bisbee area off of Turner Wardell and Mansfield Highway. They developed 85 acres down there. It's called Story Acres. Well, the reason it was significant is because New Hope and Bisbee and Kennedale were still, they were just communities. They weren't a wide spot in the road market. So all of the people in these places down here would migrate back to Kennedale to buy groceries at Dale Davis or Winn-Dixie or wherever. When Daddy and Dr. Cook bought that lot there, if you're familiar with the terrain, it drops off when you go down Summit Road around the corner, and then when you go off here, that drops off pretty significant. So it's backed up to the cemetery. The cemetery was like right in there. So Daddy put a sign out there and it said, "Dirt wanted." In about 30 days, he had to take his sign down. I mean, he had a truck driver, I guess in South Tarrant County, dumped dirt. And so they leveled it off and they sold it. They sold it to a guy by the name of Mr. Vardaman and Ken Harris. At that time, Ken Harris was a coach at Kennedale High School. They were brothers-in-law. And so they bought that and they did a replication of a Dairy Queen, but they didn't call it Dairy Queen, didn't pay the franchise fees. They just built the building and operated with hamburgers and ice cream and a ball shop. It was later sold 2 or 3 different times, and finally it was purchased by Mike Box, and he turned the franchise into a Burger Bar. Dad bought the old Hilltop Cafe building down at the corner of Bowman Springs Road. The old Exxon gas station was right there, and that cafe was located right there. And so Daddy, I forgot Mrs. Floyd? Lady's name is operating, that's the name, Miss White, not White, Floyd?
The hill?
Floyd.
Oh, Floyd.
Miss Floyd, operated that for years and years. Daddy went over next door and built that building there, and they moved in, then they moved the Hilltop over into that new building, and then Dad tore this old building down. Later on, he bought the old Exxon gas station. There's the building that actually he built, added on to that building where the Hilltop Cafe was, and he moved his real estate office into that. And as part of that side, he reached out to the Kennedale News. They published the newspaper out there for, I don't know, several years. But Daddy bought that old gas station, and he leased it out, and had to operate it 2 or 3 different times until the tenants would leave or whatever. And so finally, he tore that down and then sold the lot they built in the auto quickly in there. We had in there where his office was, next to the cafe, and he had those other spaces we rented out. And I was with him at that time, and our office was located there. Our first office, I think, maybe back here were you related to Mary?
Yes.
Mary's Cafe.
Cafe is my
And
grandmother.
a lot of people, you know, nearly everybody knows about the Mary's Cafe in Forest Hill, but Mary's had a cafe in Kennedale.
And the sign that was in Forest Hill sat at that restaurant in Kennedale.
Well, her first one was located down here on Mansfield Highway, kind of south of town. And I don't think she operated there very long, and then did the Forest Hill one and then shut this one down. But when I first got out of the service, went to work with Dad in the real estate business, D.T. Webb and Daddy officed in that old Mary's Cafe building. And then we moved from there up to that building where the Finks had their little store. Des and Granny Fink had their little store. We officed there for a while. Then later on, Dad had another sister. Her name was Jean. She held 2 master's degrees in education. She and her husband taught mostly in South Texas. Eventually, they required retired near Waco. She had developed some dementia and was not doing well, so Dad moved her to Kennedale. So she made 2 sisters and 3 brothers and himself. All ended up coming to Kennedale at one time or another for at least a short period of time. But he brought her up, put her in a nursing home on Mansfield Cardinal Road, and even after she had developed severe dementia, she could play the piano. And she'd go out there and play that piano, and all the seniors that were in the nursing home would come out there and sing, and with her. So they only had one other sister, and she never left Collingsworth County. She stayed there and farmed and stuff. Ronnie went up one summer and helped them irrigate cotton. Kind of winding down. What most sticks in my mind about the days growing up on New Hope Road was the number of schoolmates that we had and the people that walked past our house every day, either going to the grocery store, Ted Willis or Miss McKay's, going to the post office, and things like that. So we were, because we were centrally located, we had kids over there all the time. So we were playing football out in the yard, and Red Rover throwing the ball over the house and doing something. My dad, he was the ultimate recycler and repurposer. Long before it became popular to do so, he was a visionary and a builder. Myra and I drove around a few years ago, and we counted as well as we could and determined that he had built approximately 30 new homes, moved around 25 houses, moved in 3 commercial buildings, built 2 new duplexes, 1 shopping center, and 3 new commercial buildings during his life in Kennedale. He also devoted time to local activities. He was involved in school functions, served 50 years as a deacon in the Baptist Church, received his 50-year pin with the Masonic Lodge in Mansfield, was on the city council, and was a mentor to me.
We cannot forget our beautiful mother. Mother is 16 there. That's the year they got married when she was 16. Let me see my glasses. Shh. Hang on. Okay, here we go. So, going back to Ronnie coming over to the house, Mom would say, I put 4 kids to bed last night, put 2 boys to bed last night, they come in and got 3 in the bed. Ronnie would come knock on the window, let me in. So he'd come in and he was all, we never were surprised. Dad lived a remarkable life that included our beautiful mother, Dorothy Sue Davis Winters. They celebrated 69 years of marriage. Dad was a breadwinner while Mom stayed at home and took care of us. She provided 3 meals a day. She didn't believe in sandwiches because after you ate a sandwich, you're hungry a minute later. So Daddy expected 3 meals a day. We got it. We always had family or friends over, so she was always serving all of us. And sometimes we'd walk home from school to eat lunch, and the boys couldn't be security for us. So Chief Halverson, I remember we would walk me across the street sometimes. And Mom always had a meal ready and waiting for us when we did that. She did all of the laundry for all of those uncles. And back then, you had to starch and iron all of those. So she was always starching and ironing. And I didn't have any water. I don't know. Clothes. No water, I don't know. So she worked 24/7 for us. That water tucked out. So she worked at Christmas time at Montgomery Wards so we could have Christmas. She was active in community, especially with church activities where she taught Sunday school, volunteered at our WMU, worked in the nursery, took food to needy families, attended all funerals and the weddings. She ministered to a lot of women who sought her wisdom, and she had Bible studies at her house weekly. She supported our school activities such as PTA and being a ring mother. Mom and Dad always went to all the football games, even after all of us were out of school. Dad was still going to the games, yelling at the coaches. I mean, not the coaches, but the referees. I think I got picked out a few times. Mr. Delaney was the girls' basketball coach. And Pamela remember this, but when they would have games during the daytime, they only had 1 bus. So the boys got the bus for their tournament. The girls didn't get a bus. So Mr. Delaney would call Mom and Doris Moore and some more moms, and they would come and take the girls' basketball team to their games because they didn't help us. Of course, Dad couldn't go because he was working, and Mom didn't even have any players on the team. I mean, she was Cam and I were. So, even though she didn't, she took her Buick and she, along with other mothers, followed Delaney in his Cadillac to take the girls to their games. Okay, that's Mother,
On the right.
okay, yeah, that's Mother on the far right. And then, I can't remember
Ma
all the
Davis.
names. Ma Davis,
Rubendale.
Can't see that.
which one's Ruby?
Rubendale's next to Ma.
Okay, okay.
Rubendale, I think.
And I don't know that next one, and that Edith and Miss Capers
I
and,
think it's Edith, Miss Capers, and Lena Eller.
Lena Eller. Okay.
Look how pretty your mom is. How old was she in that picture?
I don't know, but look how young.
Okay, that was part of the old, First Baptist Church, and that was inside. And that was the part that was tore down when they built the new church.
So, yeah, and Mother did pies for, this church, fire department, they all did. Do you have a picture, another picture in there? Okay, so, okay, this next picture I think is, okay. So, Mom and Marion, Rhonda's mother, they decided the school needed a beauty pageant. So, they created a beauty pageant. Remember Rhonda? Yeah. They created the beauty pageant. Mom's on the left and Marion's on the right. And that was 1968. So they did that for a few years because they just thought we needed a beauty pageant.
And the queen is Charlotte McCain.
Is it Charlotte? Charlotte,
Yeah.
that's Charlotte. Yeah. That's about all I have to say. And I just wanted to remember that Mom had a servant's heart for sure.
Yes.
Then I want to add one other thing. A couple of things about New Oak Road. When we were growing up, washing clothes and stuff, the Gillespies had a washateria down past the railroad track. And their old washateria had 3 of those tubs. You'd start out in one and washing your clothes, and then you put them through a wringer, and they go into another rinse cycle, and then anyway, so we walked up and down the road there, toting, washing clothes and dirty clothes back and forth. And I don't know, I know Melody would remember that.
Yeah, we live next door to them.
They were your neighbors, weren't they? Yeah. And then also, right down here, for everybody, every year, every summer, Mrs. Brewer had blackberries. We used to all go down there and pick blackberries.
And strawberries.
And, you'd come away, your hands would be bleeding from all of the picking the blackberries.
You got
And
paid.
you do a little basket, and I think we got a nickel for a basket. And she'd put these baskets in a bigger crate, and she would take them off to the farmer's market. But that was some other things about growing up on the road. We kind of had a job and got paid for it. We had a job, we didn't get paid for it. Anyway, that's all. Did anybody have any questions?
Which Baptist church was first, since there's 2 here in town?
The First Baptist Church was, I think it was the First Baptist Church, was the first one in 1800.
The Bible Baptist was around the late 40s.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay, I got it.
Where was the tornado at in the 40s?
Where was what?
Tornado?
What, a tornado?
Yeah.
A cyclone hit the town on Broad Street, tore down lots of the buildings, which was never rebuilt. That's in an old history book.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it was before that.
Oh, 30s.
It was
Granny's
something like the
house.
30s or
Granny's
something.
house.
The fire on Broadway was
Oh, was it?
1908 that tore down, that burned up a lot of them.
So if Melvin's granddad's house was tilted from that tornado, that would have been right in that area right there. And I guess the tornado must have come through the heart of Old Town.
Yeah,
What year would that have been?
I think it was in the 40s, I'm not for sure.
I think it's before that.
Maybe it was the 30s.
I don't know, it's probably before mom and dad got it, that's how it comes out of it.
Nettie Mae told me that, Aunt May told me that she had run down the street, down to New Hope, and told these two girls, this lady that would not get out of her house and go in a storm shelter or something, you've got to get out of your house, and the lady said, I'm not going, so they made her go, and as soon as she got out of the house, the tornado hit the house.
Wow.
Well, it burned, Broad Street burned before that.
I think that was
Like in
1908, because they were all wood buildings, and they just all.
Darryl, what year did your dad and mom come to Kennedale?
48 or 49, I think. I guess 48, because I was less than a year old when they moved down here.
Okay. Ron, when did your parents first come to Kennedale?
Well, I was born in 46, so I guess it was a few years in March. And,
Was Mark Barn here?
Yeah.
But Darlene's the older one, where is she?
She went that way with the knees.
Now, what do you have right here?
I'm not sure, but somewhere between 42 and 45.
It seems like
She'll never-
those are the years, like right between 40 and 46 or 47, there was kind of a migration. And when did your parents?
I was 9 months old when my parents moved here, and I learned to walk on that property. And I remember, all of that was flooding back when you started talking about the outdoor toilets and the no water, we call water. We lived in a little 2-room house with 2 teenage boys, my mom and dad and me. I think I stayed in a baby bed till I was 5 because they didn't have any room. And then we built a little Johnson Campbell, like a shell home. And I remember mom and daddy finishing that out. And that's where I grew up. It was 2-bedroom, but we were like y'all. It was like always, I don't know where we put everybody. Because you always
So
had
people always
four.
came.
No, people always came.
And it didn't matter. You didn't sit, there was no motels.
No.
And we didn't have kids, so you just come on in and
That's
put a
right.
pallet on the floor somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. Good news.
What
Thank y'all.
year did your family get
Linda,
here?
when did your
1855.
grandparents come to Kennedale?
That was my great-great-grandparents, 1855.
Linda's.
Oh, Linda's.
I don't know, 1800s, 1700s, I don't know, they were.
You don't remember?
1700. I wouldn't know.
Well, I wasn't there.
We started school here in 1958.
I forgot. You know, in Kennedale.
But we came because my aunt and uncle were here.
I remember when Robin moved down, y'all lived across the street.
My grandmother,
About when the boys,
Here she was next door to us. But my grandmother, grandfather, when I was there, we went to them.
now who was that?
I think it was Timwood. It was Granny Timwood. Anyway, we lived with them. They weren't there very long. When we lived with them, then we bought that house on Mansfield. So I've been here, I've been here since 48.
Most of those kind of
But you know where the Currys had the car wash? Remember the Currys? That's where they showed the movie. I will never forget.
your grandparents, when they were 38, my grandfather on a dairy on Big Road. My grandfather bought a dairy in 38 on Big Road. We owned it. 1990.
Colton. Mr. Colton had that. Okay, I'm going.
Okay, we need to get our picture at the end though, Wayne, for you and Myra and Pam to come up here in the picture. Here. Which one of you, Rhonda, did you make her picture? I was supposed to say, which one of y'all makes the best? Right there. Years of experience in school, I know that.
Thank you very much.